This right here is the block that I grew up on in Inglewood, 62nd and Loomis. This is not what most people imagine when they think of Inglewood, a predominantly Black, mostly lower income neighborhood that has a reputation for being dangerous. But yet this is where I grew up. This building right here, I lived in with my mother, who's here, my uncles, and my grandmother, Marilyn G. Tenney. She purchased that building in 1972, 7 years after she came to Chicago from East St. Louis for a job at the Social Security office. This block was where I played every day with my first friends in life. I rode my bike. I bought ice cream, homemade ice cream from Miss Patterson, my grandmother's best friend, right next door. She did that every summer and sold it to all of us kids for 25 cents. The whole entire block was like an extended family. And in 1993, when I started my freshman year at Lane Tech High School on Chicago's north side, predominantly white, mostly middle income, I had to walk down this block to be at the bus stop by 5:45 a.m. to get to school by 8. This 2-hour commute from Inglewood, 15 miles north to Lane Tech, stuck with me because on that commute, I noticed my environment change. I recognized that my neighborhood looked very different from the neighborhood that my high school was in. Inglewood had mostly liquor stores, fast food restaurants, beauty supply stores, which I do like, and a lot of storefront churches, like so many. But by the time I reached north to Lane Tech, I started to see tree-lined streets, flowers, boutique stores, and lots of cafes, like so many cafes, that I started to love cafes. And I wondered, why don't we have them in Inglewood? And so that's the question that stuck with me, why? Why don't we have this? And then also, this was my first time going north, realizing that streets like PAULINA, WOLCOTT, Ashland, Western, were all streets that were in my own neighborhood, but they looked completely different. But by the time I got to school, it was a whole new world with new friends from all over the city, like literally all over the city. Lane Tech has 4,000 students. And it was through my friendships that I learned about Chicago's neighborhoods. Through my friends, I found out about the Jamaican bakery that sold delicious beef patties on Howard Street on the north side. I tasted homemade Thai food for the first time from my friends. I was scolded by my Latino friends to learn the cultural difference between being Puerto Rican and Mexican. I found out what Belizean and Dominican was. I was told by my Black friends who lived on the west side, a whole new side of the city I had never even heard of. I was told by them that the real west side of Chicago begins from Cicero to Laramie and Laramie on down. And most important to me was that I finally met like-minded teenagers from my own neighborhood. And I had to meet them 15 miles away at Lane Tech. So as I reached adulthood, I reflected on high school. And I realized that it was through my friendships that I learned how segregated Chicago was. But it was also through my friendships that I learned about Chicago's neighborhoods. And all of us literally felt like when we grow up, we could be neighbors and we could do this all day in our adult life. We thought we could own the city. I personally felt like I could live in any neighborhood in Chicago and be fine and thrive. But adulthood happens. I started to look for a home with my then husband and 2 young children. And I quickly learned all of the city isn't mine. We literally could not afford a home in any of the neighborhoods that I had enjoyed. So we settled. And we decided to move to a neighborhood that we knew we could afford and that was familiar to us. Back to Inglewood. And it was very clear to me that the prosperity that exists in Chicago was not reaching my neighborhood. The more abandoned homes, vacant lots, abandoned, boarded up buildings actually indicated it was getting worse. This is what Chicago's segregation looks like. The blue is for Black. The orange is for Latino. And the pink is for white. And the neon green that you see is Asian. Chicago is deeply segregated. In addition to that, Chicago has lost thousands of residents for 3 consecutive years for moving out of the city. Most of them are middle class. The poorest residents in Chicago are often people of color, Black and brown people, who live in communities with concentrated divestment in those blue areas on the map. And even worse than that, Chicago transplants are literally told to not go to the South Side or the West Side, instructed to not do so, which perpetuates negative stereotypes that discourage business investment and housing development. So, as I was getting my adult on, returning to my home neighborhood as a full-grown wife, mother, homeowner, I started to do community work in Inglewood. And it was through my community work with Resident Association of Greater Inglewood, after years of being involved, I saw the connection between all of the issues that we were struggling so hard to address in our community, from high crime, low home ownership, school closures, no opportunities for business investment, local entrepreneurs. Those were all the consequence of Chicago's historic racist housing policies. And so it didn't help that in 2016, the presidential election year, Chicago was compared to being a war-torn, well, compared to a war-torn country. I felt that was coded language for poor Black communities. And I was hurt. I was so hurt that I became angry. And I knew that I wanted to do something to not only defend my neighborhood, but to help Chicago at large understand the history of this city and how these issues were created. So I thought back to high school. I thought about those streets that existed in my neighborhood and the neighborhood of Lane Tech, how they were similar, the same, but looked very different. I thought about my friendships, and it inspired me to create Folded Map. Folded Map is my visual investigation of inequity in Chicago, using Chicago's grid map to literally compare addresses that are similar on the same street through photographs like this. 6720 North Ashland and 6720 South Ashland. (6129) North Wolcott, 6135 South Wolcott. (6330) North Paulina, 6329 South Paulina. (6900) North Ashland and 6900 South Ashland. So, as I was photographing these addresses, I started meeting people that I would soon call map twins, because I would invite residents who lived on the same street but different side of town to meet each other and have a conversation. This is my first map twin. The woman, Inglewood resident Nanette, and the man, Edgewater resident Wade. If you were to fold Chicago's map at the 0 point, Edgewater and Inglewood are neighborhoods that would touch. And they decided to meet each other. So did my Hermitage map twins, John Silverstein and his wife Paula, and Maurice. They are as different as they look. But they decided to meet each other. And then the women of Winchester is what I call them. 6400 North Winchester resident, Bridget, and 5600 South Winchester resident, Carmen. So, since I knew I was going to be having these strangers meet each other, I decided to ask them 5 to 6 questions. How did you come to live in your neighborhood? How do you describe your neighborhood? Is everything you need on a day-to-day basis accessible in your neighborhood? If not, what's missing? And then the big adult question, how much did your house cost? How much do you pay for rent? And then also, is your place of peace in your neighborhood? So I would like to play for you an excerpt of the Hermitage map twins, John Silverstein, Paula, and Maurice, answering what's missing in your neighborhood.
I wouldn't mind seeing a theater, a bowling alley, maybe some type of center for the youth to kind of go hang out at, or have some things to do when they get out of school, or to be able to be exposed to different artistic options to just kind of give them something to do, aside kind of like hanging outside and finding different ways or getting into trouble, or those trouble even being an option, because if you have nothing to do, of course, it's like there's trouble waiting right over there. So
yeah,
those are some good suggestions.
Yeah.
I don't know. Are we?
Yeah, a lot of our needs are met here. There's
I mean, I'm sure we could think of something, but yeah.
What these map twin conversations do is help us see how our city's investment in certain neighborhoods and divestment in others completely dictate where we decide to live, or if we can even live there at all. And it aims to help residents remove the responsibility of feeling like we willingly contribute to segregation, and refocus that responsibility onto our elected officials. Folded Map created a space for residents who were strangers to actually meet each other, visit each other's homes, and have a conversation and listen to each other. And although Folded Map is just a small art project, I hope it serves as a reminder to us all that no matter what side of the city we live on, we are all neighbors. And we can begin to actually dismantle segregation through our personal relationships by just getting to know someone from a neighborhood that's different than yours. I would like to play for you in closing the women of Winchester answering the question of how did it feel to meet your map twin?
For me, we look different, but we want the same things. We live different places, but we want the same thing. So it gives me a validation that everybody wants the same thing. Most people want the same thing, although we're on different sides of the track.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I feel like I really enjoyed when you came to our house, but this is by far way more important to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew I liked you immediately the minute you opened your door. But it's true. I feel like we've shared so many similarities as we've sat here, you know, of wanting the same thing. I'm grateful because you created an opportunity to just deepen that sense of care for other people.
Thank you. That was just her encouraging me to continue.